John, here is, as you know, right now at the UN, they're talking about what has happened in Venezuela. Here is
Yeah.
what the Russian representative said.
Particularly appalled by the unparalleled cynicism with which Washington did not even attempt to conceal the true aims of its criminal operation, namely the establishment of unbridled control over Venezuela's natural resources and the assertion of their hegemonical ambitions in Latin America.
Yeah. And he continues that Washington is generating fresh momentum for neocolonialism and imperialism. This
Yes.
is the way that Russia perceives what's going on.
Oh, no,
But
well, hang on. Can I just correct you there? This is what the foreign ministry is saying, and it's taking the lead here. Mr. Nebenzia is instructed by Foreign Minister Lavrov. Foreign Minister Lavrov was approved by Kremlin to make the statement much quicker in relation to Vice President Rodriguez than the Americans were. The Americans have recognized Rodriguez as the transition president constitutionally of Venezuela, and the Americans have dropped the demand for immediate elections and so forth. We've said all that. No, no, no. What's happening in Russia is unusual. It's the foreign ministry now leading. The Kremlin is silent. The Kremlin silent. Yes, this is the time. My office is closed. I should be on holiday, but I'm not. Russia's in its deep holiday until mid January. Yes, there is that reason for the president of the country to say nothing on this conflict. However, in factional political terms in Moscow, this is the death knell of Kirill Dmitriev and the oligarch faction that wants to do business as usual with the United States. Nebenzia's remarks there don't leave any doubt that you can't do business with the United States. And anyone who does within Venezuela or within Russia is fifth column, is acting for the United States against the interests of Russia or Venezuela, as the case may be. The foreign ministry, in attacking the hegemon, is in fact attacking those inside Russia who've sought to achieve a settlement in the Ukraine advantageous to their business interests in alliance with US business interests. So it's a very important thing to see Nebenzia on the screen there speaking for a powerful faction whose, let's say, energy uh, in influencing President Putin has been enhanced by what's happening.
John, just the reaction on the part of Medvedev was somehow amazing to me. He wrote a long test, but the last part of his argument was that the operation in Caracas became the best proof of the fact that any state must strengthen its armed forces to the maximum, not allowing various rich, arrogant actors to casually change the constitutional order in search of oil or something else, and maximum strengthening that guarantees reliable protection of a country means only one thing: a nuclear arsenal. And he says, long live nuclear weapons. How many countries would feel this way? Or even if Russia, because Russia is a, is a nuclear power, I would say the most powerful nuclear power on this planet. But what is the message to other countries like Iran? Maybe I don't know if the new tensions between Turkey and Israel. How about Turkey? How about other people? How about Latin America, Brazil, other countries?
Well, I guess you mean, and I agree with you, uh, it's a statement that the only fundamental protection a state has from uh, this type of Caracas attack is a nuclear weapons deterrent. Yes? So, applied to Iran facing the Israeli nuclear attack possibility, something the Israelis aren't shy to threaten, Iran must develop a counter nuclear capability to deter an Israeli one. If that's what you mean, I entirely agree with you. Now, uh, in in the in the Americas, uh, you're talking about powerful countries with potential nuclear capability in future, like Brazil. Um, are, are they are they drawing the conclusion that the only way to deter and defend against U.S. attempt, and there's been attempts by the U.S. in Brazil many times over, including placing military juntas in power in Brazil. Is there any way that, short of nuclear arms, can Brazil defend? Uh, is there any way a combination of Cuba, Nicaragua, Mexico, Brazil, Colombia can collectively deter US attacks on each of them? The US has now proposed to attack each of them. Colombia, Cuba, and Mexico were the three identified, in addition to Greenland, as the Trump administration group. Trump, Lutnick, Stephen Miller, and the others flew from Florida to Washington from their weekend off. Is there any alternative to nuclear deterrence? And does anything else work with the United States? That's what Medvedev's saying, right? And that's got to be the conclusion of all those countries threatened as they are. Um, I don't think I can add any more to that point. It's a very menacing environment, and to deter the U.S. attack, to deter it, requires a level of defense which Venezuela did not put up. And it's yet to be explained why there's no sign of air defense capability. Why didn't that appear to happen? Um, it's out of the question that a country like Venezuela can to develop a nuclear deterrent capability, but it had air and other forms of deterrence capability, and they appear not to have been used.
John, we know before Chavez being in power in Venezuela, there were other governments which were somehow friendly to the United States. But
Yes.
that, with the new movement, do you think they're gonna get something different, or we are in a cycle of repeating the same history over and over in Venezuela?
Well, I can reach from my paper and read you this especially mild statement by Vice President, Acting President Rodriguez. Title: A Message from Venezuela to the World and the United States. Rodriguez says Venezuela reaffirms its commitment to peace and peaceful coexistence. Our country aspires to live without external threats. We prioritize moving towards balanced and respectful international relations between the United States and Venezuela, uh, premised on sovereign equality and non interference. Then this is the vice president after her president has been kidnapped by the United States, and at least 80 Venezuelans killed, 32 members of the presidential guard killed. This is what Rodriguez says. We invite the US government to collaborate with us on an agenda of cooperation oriented towards shared development within the framework of international law to strengthen lasting community coexistence. President Donald Trump, our peoples, and our region deserve peace and dialogue, not war. This has always been President Nicolas Maduro's message. Now, that's remarkably mild. It's an offer to Trump to cooperate. It's a claim that Maduro was making the same offer. And all the indications from the US press that I've seen indicate Maduro made those offers. He did offer oil concessions to the United States. He was offered everything on a non attack, non aggression if he resigned. And that apparently, according to the US version, and I don't have any reason to believe or disbelieve what I've read, what Rodriguez is offering here, Maduro had already offered. So Trump has decided to remove Maduro and accept Rodriguez. And Rodriguez is she, and this is, I'm asking a question, is Rodriguez offering the same deal that Trump rejected with Maduro? And does that deal mean that Rodriguez is ready to give up Russian and Chinese oil concessions and give them to the United States? That's what remarks by Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, imply. That the implication of their tough talk is we won't have adversary countries investing in our backyard. We will not tolerate Chinese and Russian concessions in Venezuela. We're going to take them back. Now, there's no great assurance from Rodriguez here that she's opposed to that. That's not, if you treat what Rodriguez says here that I've just read out and what I've read out as Foreign Minister Lavrov's solidarity with Rodriguez to increase their cooperation and strategic partnership, it would appear that Rodriguez is ready to do what Trump wants and reject what Russia already holds as its concessions, and China too. So it's very hard for me to see, and I'm simply saying I'm uninformed. I'm not an expert on Venezuelan politics, but understanding what the words mean, I'd have to say that we see here the possibility that Rodriguez will concede to Trump. Trump's version of it is she will do what she's told. We will enforce it. Well, she's suggesting she will. On the other hand, establishing oil concessions, removing Russian and Chinese oil concessions and operations in Venezuela, replacing them with American, will require a level of boots on the ground to protect Americans in Venezuela that hasn't been calculated yet. Is there a peaceful way forward for shared development of a country that's lacked it, has failed to develop as it could have done? These are all questions. I can't answer them yet, but we can see the international, I'd say, competition, the international conflict, the war that Trump continues to wage against China, Russia, and India in particular, Brazil as well, and so on. We see the US attempting to show in Venezuela that its war against the rest of the world can be dictated by an imbalance of force, by shock and awe. Well, I say this isn't a display of shock and awe that succeeded. It's shock and awe shucks. It's doubtful that the US can succeed, but it's equally doubtful that it's certain. Why do I say doubtful? It's certain they were not deterred by anything that China said or did, or anything that Russia said or did. And then the question becomes, since it was obvious what the US Armada in the Caribbean intended to do, since it's now obvious in retrospect, as Russian military experts explain in the pages of the Russian press, how the operation was executed at the cyber level, the electric wall level, the combination and coordination of air, ground, internal forces, internal subversion, CIA operations. The Russian expertise on how you do that's pretty clear. It's having to fight such a similar war in the Ukraine, right? But since it's clear in retrospect, it must have been clear in anticipation. So, a question my Russian sources are asking is why wasn't Russia more prepared? Why wasn't China more prepared? Why didn't they do more to deter? No answer to that question. Lots of conspiracy theory. And our podcast, your podcast, Nima, doesn't engage in conspiracy theory. We don't engage in beating our chests and telling everybody who's winning when they're not.
John, here is the points. Just moments ago, the Chinese representative at the UN just expressed the policy of China and their reaction to what has happened in Venezuela. The main points here are the US violated Venezuela's sovereignty and the UN Charter. Maduro must be released immediately. The UN Security Council must act to restore peace and legality. Latin America is not a US colony and it's a zone of peace. No country can act as the world's police nor presume to be the international judge. And Beijing is warning that the United States is repeating the same crimes of Iraq, Libya, Iran, invading sovereign states, fueling instability, and devastating civilians. I think they have just said it. They made their point in this address at the UN. And I don't see, John, after all, any of these, you know, countries of the global south, particularly China and Russia, backing down toward what the United States is trying to do, manipulating not just in Latin America. I would argue many people are talking about that the United States is getting back to the Western Hemisphere, but you see what they're doing in Ukraine with the new attacks. You see what is going on in the Middle East, in the West Asia with the attack on Iran. And Venezuelan president was talking all about peace before being captured by the US president.
Well, the one thing we can say that China achieved was a small detail in the timing of the US operation. Remember that the last international delegation to meet with Maduro on the Friday before the Saturday of the attack was the Chinese delegation led by Qi Cao, who's the senior Chinese official responsible for Latin America. What we know is that the US delayed its operation, and General Kane in his briefing indicated delayed its operation for several days for what Kane described as the weather to improve, meaning the cloud cover over Caracas to lift. Well, it wasn't just the clouds that lifted. It was the Chinese delegation that had to leave town before the US attacked. The US clearly did not want, the Trump administration did not want any Chinese casualties during the operation. And they waited for the Chinese to leave town before attacking. That's a reminder that Clinton administration wasn't so careful. In May of 1999, during the attack and the war against Serbia and the attack on Belgrade, two US missiles attacked and hit and killed individuals at the Chinese embassy in Belgrade. This was clearly an attempt by Kane to delay, and by Trump, of course, to delay so as not to strike at China so visibly. Now, the question is whether this statement of outrage by the Chinese at the UN Security Council. The UN Security Council is a table for people fluffing their feathers and beating their chests. It's not a significant indication of what China's prepared to do to put its muscle where its mouth is. It's equally the case, and I've no sense in repeating it, that the Chinese remarks by President Xi and Foreign Minister Wang Yi have been fallen far short of a demonstrable deterrent. Is the Chinese readiness now to impose sanctions on the US for to enforce what they demand? If they demand that Maduro be released, is China prepared to sanction the US with withholding of Chinese strategic goods, rare earth metals, other things that have been under negotiation since President Trump reached an apparent agreement with President Xi in South Korea? Is China prepared to sacrifice its demand for Maduro to its national trade and economic negotiation with Russia? Or is it prepared to enforce its will in the only effective way China's demonstrated? China has not demonstrated its capability to fight militarily. It has demonstrated its capability to exercise economic muscle. If it means what it said in the UN a few minutes ago, it needs to demonstrate its capability to inflict a price on the US does not want. That would mean sacrificing China's interests in reaching a trade agreement, a long-term trade agreement. This is so obvious. Reporters on the aircraft with President Trump asked him, and he said, I'm going to be meeting President Xi in Beijing in April. He reaffirmed that in a few weeks' time, he's off to China. Is China going to accept Trump? Trump just said it. I'm coming in April. Do we hear from the Chinese side that the April visit's off until President Maduro is released? If the Chinese won't say that, then there's nothing serious about their demand for the release of President Maduro, is there?
Yeah, actually, there is a lot to do on the part of the China and maybe Russia, but yeah, that's a huge question in my opinion. If they want to go that far to respond to the United States, and
They don't show their readiness to go that far. You're quite right, Nina. They don't. And you're in Iran, you're in a position to report to us all the degree to which Iranian officials who are under regime threat internally, external threats up to nuclear attack from Israel and the United States, how they understand the difference between talk uh, and military and economic power. I mean, this is to state the obvious, but this is a major challenge to the concept of the global South. It's a major challenge to the concept of multipolarity. It's a major challenge to neutrality in international relations. These are all challenges, and if they're not met with strength, the outcome's weakness, and the outcome is weakness in favor of um, U.S. confidence that its force can work. So I'm offering the following equation: S plus S equals SS. Sovereignty plus self-sufficiency equals strategic success. But if you concede any element of sovereignty or you concede self sufficiency in this world, you get strategic defeat. You are defeated. S minus S equals SD, strategic defeat. And China's facing strategic defeat. It's facing strategic defeat unless it puts its sovereignty and self sufficiency in contest here with a demand it's just made. It wants Maduro released. Really, it does? What's it prepared to do for that? Equally, Lavrov, foreign minister of Russia, has told the vice president something less, something less than the release of Maduro, but the preservation of the sovereignty of the regime, the Bolivarian revolution, the government that Maduro left behind. That's a bit different. It's important that we see the difference between Russian and Chinese positions here.